G'day, listeners. This episode is proudly brought to you by our major sponsor, supshq.com.au. Use code BENS15 at checkout to receive 15% off on your next purchase. G'day, listeners. Thank you for joining in on another episode of the Matter Mentality podcast, where we talk everything nutrition, psychology, performance training, try to help you be your best. I am joined by a very special guest, the first guest actually on this edition of the podcast, a very, I want to say successful, but someone that I think I have a lot more to do with philosophically and mentally that I will let introduce himself because the list is too extensive for me to try and put into context. But we are joined by Coach Kav. How are you doing, sir? Thank you for jumping on and joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute honor, and I'm looking forward to it. And I hope your audience basically thinks the same thing that I think about you guys, where it's like, oh, that's the guy with the funny accent, but we don't get to say that much. So I appreciate you having me on. I'm sure it's going to be a great talk. I think I'm going to get tons out of it too.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It was actually funny. Brooklyn was saying when we were confirming dates, you were sending through audio snippets on Instagram, like you were sending through audio because obviously you're so busy, like, on the go. And it was like, we're so used to talking to Aussies and stuff, and like our Aussie guests or athletes or what have you, and then like your strong American accent comes through on the audio, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna like this guy. It's gonna come through. It's gonna be great. There's such contrast.
My wife speaks 7 languages, and she's like, people could barely understand your English. So I'm like, good God, all right, I'll figure it out. It's all right.
7 languages. That's impressive. I guess, man, like, let's just get straight into it. Introduce yourself. Tell us about what you do. I know, we've got the AthleteHQ, we've got the Sport and Speed Team Institute. Like, there's so much to talk about, but I guess like the easiest way to do it is to let you open it up.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things that's interesting as you get started, because your audience is people that are actual, practically, looking at their life and saying, I want to get better at something. I want to have high performance in my body composition, my lifestyle, my nutrition, my mental, kind of approach to what I'm doing. Or you have coaches that you actually have, that want to learn from you as well. So you have this wide range of audience. So it's important that you guys understand, like, from my standpoint, the reason why I have my background is I've been coaching for 20 years, whereas this industry kind of expands and then it gets hard or something happens and then it kind of contracts a little bit.
Yeah.
Or the industry expands because it gets good and lucrative and people start to like it and it gets fun, and then it gets hard. And then it contracts again. So while it's contracting over the years, I have been on the front end of that. Right. So, and then it bumped out a bit, right? It expanded, and then I became able to have that kind of launch with it. And then when it contracted again, I stayed in it and I kept going. So that's one of the reasons why I've had a lot of success, is that I've put my head down and I've worked every single day for 20 plus years. Rewinding the tape, I'm born and raised in Miami. I was a 5-sport athlete. In the United States, sports is more of an identity, right? So people identify themselves by what they do and how they operate, especially parents. They live a lot vicariously through their kids. I was very fortunate enough to have both parents that said, you are going to be your own man. You are going to figure some stuff out. You are going to be in an environment that is going to be competitive, hard, and you are going to learn to work through it. So what happened was I have an older brother, 3 years older than me, highly successful, very competitive athlete as well. But when I had that as a mentor in front of me, right? Someone older than me to kind of like watch, right?
Yep.
And I started to get better. And when I would go back into those same environments, my dad would then move me. He would put me into a different organization, right? And I'm like, what the heck, right? Like, I want to be in that environment. But the minute I started either dominating, he would take me out and put me in an environment where I had to kind of climb myself out of the pack. And that kind of laid the groundwork for understanding how environment is everything. And then the environment will always win, right? So if you put people in an average environment, even if they are above average, they're going to go down.
Yeah.
Right. You're going to take a guy who's a 9 and he's going to drop down to a 7 if everybody in that room's a 5. 100%. Right. But if you take a 7 and everyone in there's a 10, he's going to bump up to an 8, even if he doesn't have the competencies and the work ethic and everything else. He'll either leave quickly, he'll bounce, or he'll level up. And environment always wins. So if you could create an environment to where people or yourself will be successful, no matter what it is that you venture into, you're going to have success. And the fact that I played 5 different sports, the fact that I was a highly competitive athlete myself, allowed me the opportunity to, when I got forced into coaching, to understand things from their perspective and say, okay, I need to put my athletes in the best environment, which means me as a coach, I had to go to the best environments to learn. So I had to become very, very quickly the ultimate like bullshit meter and filtering mechanism, because I could not afford to learn from bad people.
Yes.
So I had to go really, really quickly to like the author of the book. I didn't want to listen to someone's opinions of something that never
of it.
And that unfortunately we get today, it's so easy to show up as an expert, right? I mean, trust me, if I looked as good as you do with your shirt off, I would probably walk around half naked all the time, right? You got a full set of hair, you got a 6-pack whenever you want, right? For me, I got to do everything perfect in order to look halfway decent. But the one of the benefit is I have zero body dysmorphia, and I know for a fact that my body's an engine. That's what whatever I want my body to do, it's going to do.
Yeah.
I've understood that performance matters, right? Environment is what controls like kind of how you show up every day, and it almost takes away from your energy. So it's a very, very important that you kind of manage the water inside the fish tank, right? So it's like the fish are not sick, the water is dirty.
Yes.
So whenever you start looking at it and go, okay, that's a bad fish, that didn't work. Well, you know what? Maybe the environment is not suited for what you're trying to accomplish. And for me, as a high performance mentality, I had to always kind of challenge myself, but I always had to hold things to different standards. And with that becomes a level of accountability, not just from your clients, but also from your peers.
Yes.
And you have to kind of accept that, right? You have to accept that sometimes you're not going to always win, and you're not going to always have those environments that are perfect, and you're going to have to learn to step up or own up to something that you don't do that so well. So, after college, fast track into, I got hurt. That changed kind of the scope of my personal trajectory. I thought I was going to play college football, go to the NFL, make millions of dollars, become freaking Iron Man and a philanthropist, and give back to the world. That's what I thought was going to happen, right? God had different plans for me. Yeah, exactly. Right. God had different plans. I got hurt, and it fast tracked my coaching. Mm-hmm. Now I got into coaching because one of my athletes, who was a friend of mine, trusted. He's like, hey, I trust you. And that basically meant that he said, hey, I'm going to take my athletic career and put it in your hands. And I'm holding on to this saying, hey, number one, don't screw it up. That's the rule number one. Don't screw it up. Mm-hmm. So I had to kind of search and find the people that I was going to learn from so that I could go apply that right away. Mm-hmm. And got lucky, right? Every single time. Luck has a lot to do with your success if you back it up with some hard work, right? And you'll get luckier the more that you're always in an opportunity to kind of receive the outcome of whatever game you're playing. And I'm always in a position to receive. I mean, one of the lessons I learned from my brother, he loves fishing, and we're done for the day. So we pull up our rods, get that hook in the boat, and then we get going. And he would literally troll with the hook in the water. He would always have a line in the water at all times. He goes, hey, it's going to be really hard to catch something if your line's in the boat. Always have a hook in the water. And as a coach, that's such a valuable lesson, right? 100%. If you think about it, it's like, hey, always be in an opportunity where you could get a win.
Yeah.
And I think so many times we don't even get no's because we don't even give a chance an opportunity to get a yes.
Yeah.
So what would happen if we always had a hook in the water? And that's one of the things that I learned is I've been okay being wrong very, very quick. Mm-hmm. The faster I'm wrong, the more I learn.
I completely agree by that. I've heard Elon talk about it. I've seen numerous coaches talk about it. The faster you can fail, I've seen business coaches talk about it. The faster you can fail, if you have a growth mindset and a growth perspective, is that it's a chance to learn and improve and implement. The faster you can implement corrections to mistakes, the faster you can progress. And that way you're able to learn on the go and basically just redirect and readjust, or recorrect the course, if you will, and implement what you learned from the failure. Then it doesn't become a failure, it just becomes an opportunity to be better.
And if you're doing this stuff every single day, right? The failure that you're speaking of, no one ever is going to see.
Yeah.
Because it's actually going to be in the preparation.
Yeah.
So that means that when it's on the line, right, when you have skin in the game and you're actually on the line and you're ready to go and everyone's watching you, you're more prepared than everyone else. And I think that's the separator in sport, and that's the separator in competition, is that I'm willing to put myself, to a test when no one else is watching, so that when I step on the line, I have confidence in what my body could do. And that's what I did for my athletes every single day. So, constantly doing that over the years, got really well known for speed, primarily because it's really easy. You go to the Olympics, you win a medal in the 100 meters. People say, oh, you know a thing or two about speed, right? Nowadays, if you throw a cool drill on Instagram and you tell everybody that you know somebody, or you took a picture with somebody one day, all of a sudden you're the best speed coach. It's the same thing. If you have a six pack, you're the best body comp prep person, right? But what happens is here's an interesting thing. We all say that. The truth is, high performers will seek you out. They will filter through BS just as much as you and I have filtered through a high level of education to figure out what's the right content for us. They do the same thing. So over the years, what happened is people started showing up at my doorstep after I put thousands of kids into college through sports, after I put hundreds of guys into the professional ranks, after I've been to a few Olympics and had a lot of success. People just started showing up. So the athletes that I was playing the game with, I was basically playing poker with pocket aces every single day. And you don't win all of those hands, but you imagine what happens if you play the game with such a better hand than everybody else. So I automatically was able to test things. And when I was able to test things with these super high level athletes, you realize research is crap, because nobody is doing research on the fastest athletes in the world, because there's only one of them. There's only a handful of guys that run sub 10. There's only a handful of guys that could jump through the roof, that could dunk a basketball and do all of these things every single day at a high level.
You can't sample size that.
I started to realize, hey, all of this stuff, there's some foundations that are true. But the reality of it is that no one is doing it practically at a high level across multiple different sports, because the people at the top in those sports, they're the 1%ers. So that's what separated me from everybody else. And one of the things that allowed me to do that is having great mentors in my life to say, hey, get back in your lane, go do this. Here's what you need to do. And I still am. I mean, I'm on a call probably twice a week with people all over the world to say, hey, in kind of my portfolio of athletes that I have right now that represents my brand, or people that don't even know I work with, that I happen to be kind of in charge of and guiding their process. I ask the people that I trust the most, where are you? Where are you in that problem? What do you think I'm missing? Do everything you can to poke holes in my game. And when people care about you, your mentors will pour into you. So I've been very fortunate to have people kind of literally just fast track me in my life for that. And that's basically put me in the position that I'm in today. And that's what gives me these opportunities on a constant basis.
I love that. I love that. You're basically describing, if we were to go step for step lifetime timelines, you're basically describing me, which is I guess almost the profound and scary part about us connecting and chatting is I went through such a similar process where I thought I was going to play, at least contracted rugby league over here, try and go pro, or at least semi-pro to get to that level where it was right, kind of our version of collegiate over here, where it's that just before pro status.
Academy and all that stuff.
Exactly right. Chase those contracts. This is what I do for life now. Car accident happens, damages my lower spine, basically takes away all my movement patterns, all my exercise, all my strength. And all right, you can't do your job, your career, your sport, your hobby, nothing, you're gone. And then, fast track that later, I'm now into bodybuilding, I'm into coaching people, I'm into taking what I learned from myself and sort of seeing the competitive mindset and mentality that I took to my rehabilitation. Okay, well, how do I give that to people in their everyday life? You shouldn't need extreme trauma to find that talent or that skill. Let's try and figure it out. So yeah, it's definitely interesting how similar your story is. Obviously just a lot further advanced, but such a similarity for us being literally at other ends of the pond.
Well, I would like to know, where in that story did you lose your hair? Because I did. I'd like to understand what happened.
I think bodybuilding hasn't quite taken it yet from me. It's probably in the near future, going by my old man's hairline.
You brought up a good point. You talked about trauma, right? And trauma fast tracks you, right? Trauma, competitive sports, tough life circumstances,
Oh yeah.
they teach you some lessons that, a lot of times are very good experiences for you to grow, and it matures you so much
They're
faster.
mentors in themselves, right?
However, one of the problems with trauma is it matures you faster when you are not ready to handle that situation.
Yeah.
So you bury it for a long time, and it normally comes back up in another way as you get older.
Yeah.
So as much as I was very mature for my age, as much as I was an old soul, as much as I understood that I had to, my name was out there and I was in front of a camera as a high performance athlete, you're going to be in the spotlight. What also you're doing is that's kind of your piece, right? You're being in the spotlight becomes your flow state. It becomes your peak state because it's actually where all of your worries go away.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then in the other areas of your life, some other shit starts to come up, and that's what happens. So we bury that trauma and we don't ever deal with it, and we use it as fuel. The problem is it is still burning. And we have to address it. And I don't think a lot of times we ever address it. And then it uncovers itself, unfortunately, in a pretty ugly way. So it's our job, not just as coaches, but athletes ourselves, to actually work on us, because sometimes we work on that through our athletes. Sometimes we use it. It becomes a vice within some of the work that we do. Right. It's probably why we pour ourselves so much into our work.
Yeah.
And I think that it's critical. Yeah, it is. It's critical for us to actually deal with it because it does show itself up in different ways.
I think reading a bit more about, where you guys are and how your philosophy around coaching, you are very invested. And it's something that we do here as well, and that I try to emulate, is being more invested in your clients. Like, you have a very personal, like I see in your philosophy and the way you describe it, is we build our coaching system on trust and mutual relationship. Like, we're in it with them, we're there trying to be with them, almost like a family. Like, it's a very similar premise to what we try to build here with our community, our family aspect to our clients, is that you're not just someone paying me money. You're not just here to turn up. Like, I want to make sure, something I wrote the other day was that if there is no life progression, then anywhere where there's physique progression is short-lived, because life has to be successful around it. Otherwise, just as fast as you gain your physique, if you will, it can be very easily taken away because the rest of it goes to shit. And it kind of seems like that's a very similar premise for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on there. One of the things that's really interesting, with that is you could get really advanced in one area of your life, but be very immature in elementary in another area of your life.
Yeah.
Where you get value is when you compound your experience in an area that you become really advanced as you create leverage into the new area that you're going into. Because you are starting from a kind of blank slate in the new venture or the new area of your life or the new area of study. So where you don't have that expertise, but you know the process to get to the top.
Yeah.
So that's half the battle. So if you could take that same process and fast track it in another era, now all of a sudden, instead of kind of a linear approach, it's a compounding approach. This is why emotion is so important in coaching.
Yeah.
Because a logical way of thinking is a very linear way of process, right? And progress. But an emotional way of approaching stuff is a way to compound the effort. And most people tell you, hey, take your emotion out of it.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, you're an athlete of mine, bring your ego, because it's going to get checked with a bunch of other guys. It's not going to get checked by me.
Yeah.
It's going to get checked by the fact that you're walking in a room with a bunch of other dudes. What's going to happen then?
Yeah. Yeah. You've got to either, that ego is either going to help you survive or thrive, or it's going to sort of like, do you dirty and you're going to fall down. Right. Yeah. It's so, like, I have a very similar premise to how I approach, like, when I onboard clients, whether they're, we've got guys now that are going to the Australian Defence Force, sort of like your version of Top Gun, like they're working into being like our fast jet fighter pilot program. We've got guys that are getting acting, like just different things that aren't just about their physique. So the way that I approach it is I like to make sure that when we're onboarding, we're starting, like, why do you want to work with me? I want to know in broken down, like, levers almost, or systems, not only what is your physique outcome, but what is your personal or business goals as well? What's your career goals? Where do you want to be in 5 years? And I'll map it out with them. 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 3 years, 5 years. How's it going to look, feel, sound, smell? Like, what is it going to be like? I can tell you to a T what it's going to look like when I win my pro card in my bodybuilding career. And I can tell you the people who will be in the audience, the smells, the sounds, whether it happens or not is irrelevant, but I can tell you that it's going to based on this. And I map that same premise with them is, whether you want to lose 10 kilos and improve lifestyle, or whether you want to be a top tier bodybuilder or an elite athlete, the rest of your life, I want to know where you want that to go as well. Because you can isolate your pro sport. That's great. But we don't exist in a vacuum. You've got to have relationships, friendships, family. You've got to have careers or businesses. If you don't go pro, do we have finances elsewhere to make sure that you're succeeding? How are we handling your mental stress, your mental traumas? Like, what are you doing to what are you doing to deal with the anxieties and pressures? Do you have downtimes? Do you have, personal interests that you might find exciting? Do you read? Do you comic book? Do you movies? What else in your life are we optimizing so that when it comes to your actual, physique goal or your performance goal, it's all supporting it rather than pulling it down? So I find if you have that one big goal, that's great. And I'm all for monstrous goals, as I no doubt you are. But if the rest of it isn't supporting it, it can anchor it. And it almost becomes detrimental if the rest of your life isn't supporting the big dream. If you're not putting some effort or time into shaping that, it's going to anchor you to where you are and allow you to progress, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you brought up a point around, like, you saw who was in the crowd, you knew what it would feel like, you understood the environment, and you understood what it would smell like you have taken all of your senses into consideration for your future goals. When you visualize something, there is no difference between what you see in your brains and your mind's eye when you actually think and process it to what your body's actually doing. There is no difference in the reality of that, right? Your brain can't separate the difference. So it's your job to start visualizing positive thoughts, right? Most people are very self-destructing, right? Once they get to a top, they then self-destruct. There's a lot of people that they're self-deprecating. They talk crap about each other. I do that. I joke around about myself a little bit. But when it gets down to like the serious part of their day, right? The reason why a lot of people don't have the confidence is because they talk so much crap about themselves that their body and their brain is hearing it.
100%.
It's being ingrained. So if you talk like that to someone else on the street, the way you talk to yourself, you'd probably end up in some fights.
Yeah,
right?
Or you get knocked out for sure.
So why aren't you telling yourselves what you need to hear?
Yep.
Right? And if you could, like, why don't you just control that voice? And if you could control that voice, you become your own coach. And when you become your own coach, you now become the best student. Because you now understand, oh, this is who I need to be as an athlete. So that now when I hired you as a coach, I now surrender all of my ego to you and let you guide the process. And that's where you have high performance. So visualization is critical.
I saw that in your when you're looking at your 3 pillars and you have mind, body, spirit, just how important you find narrative, identity, and visualization.
Yeah, because so when you look at kind of my philosophy of an athlete-centric model, right? It's mind, body, spirit. When athletes first come to me because they want to achieve something physically that they haven't had the result in their previous life, and whatever reason why. But at the end of the day, right, the fastest way to get a physical change is through their mindset.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm going to build buy-in by making the physical change, but I need to get them to mentally believe it. I got to get them to shift wherever they are, going from, whatever they think is their version of success to what my standard of operating is. Right. So we call it the mic, right? In order to, where we kind of change the mind is through the mic. So it's like, what's that microphone that you're sharing to the world? How do you show up, right? Because we talk about your battles, right? Every single time, every day that you go into, there's a battle of self-awareness. There's a battle of, social awareness, and there's a battle of situational awareness, right? How do I show up? How do I act? How do I handle different dynamics, right? So I say that because that's your voice. That's how you show up to the world, right? So your mic stands for mastery. I believe in order to develop the mind and change it, you have to master something. Because a 5-year-old knows if they're good at something or not. They just won't do the thing that is hard, which is actually learning. What is easy is acquiring knowledge. What is acquiring information. What is hard is learning. The actual act of learning is when something becomes difficult. It's taking an unknown to a known and connecting the dots.
100%.
But acquiring information is just taking something and you understand it. It's like, okay, cool, I got it. Like
Yeah,
there's no there's no actual resistance to that absorption of that knowledge. So you have to develop mastery, because if you don't develop mastery, now all of a sudden your perspectives are off, right? You have no self-awareness. You think that you're good, but you've never put it on the line. So you think you're better than what you are, right? So one of the benefits of like bodybuilding is like there's nowhere to hide, right? Like there's the concept there's nowhere to hide. I work with sometimes, and like there's nowhere to hide, right? Same exact thing. Like that's on you. Ain't no, I can't jump in there with you and help you, right? That work's done, right? There's no light bulb that's going to be off that day that's going to give you a better angle.
No.
Right? I promise you those lights are going to be bright and everyone's going to look. So mastery builds a foundation of awareness. It tells you, I know what I'm good at. I know where I'm going to stay. I know where I'm going to grow. The second thing is image, right? And that stands for self-image, right? It becomes basically a reflection of how I feel about myself. And then the last one is confidence. One is how I view myself. Confidence is how I feel other people view me.
Yep.
So if you tell me, hey, you suck, and I don't have a good image of myself, I'm going to work backwards. And all of a sudden your statement to me is going to be tested based upon my own self-image. Yeah. My self-image is going to be tested by my skill, competency, and mastery of whatever it is that I'm trying to develop. So we have to work in changing the athlete's mindset first so that we could actually work on the body, which is really simple, right? It's just train, fuel, recover. Yeah. Now, the components of physical preparation, the components of how we get there are completely individualized based upon a goal. But the act of taking an athlete through the process and a journey is about understanding that you have to have a mindset shift when you come in through the door and then how you leave. And as a coach, it's your job to change the state of your athlete every single time they show up. It would be really nice if someone walked through your doors every single time in every single session with just the state and readiness, with an attitude to learn and to grow and to say, I know where I'm weak, coach. I know I need you to push me here today. I'm ready. Bring it. Like no one ever does that.
Nope.
They want to hide and shy away from the hardest areas and the darkest areas of their life, the hardest areas of their physical prep and the darkest areas of their deep emotional threats inside. 100%. So your job to like dig deep, reach down in there, pull it out, but then kind of like hug them and protect them once it's out of the bag. Yeah. Right. And say, okay, we're going to work on this shit. And that's how you develop high performance, is that you're willing to go deep. I don't do superficial well. That's one of the difficulties with a lot of people. It's like you can be friends with a lot of people if you just do superficial well, because everybody will like you.
Yeah.
I'm okay pissing people off because that's my filtering mechanism of who I'm going to spend time with.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree.
And that's how I basically evaluate the work that I do and who I'm willing to put time into as well.
And I find it just in just what you're describing there. So it's so funny because I can see, like, I'm not sure where you're sort of studying, besides like, obviously the things you have studied, but also like who you mentor with, but you're literally describing to a T things like social narrative theory, social identity theories. You're describing things like how we look at self-fulfilling prophecies and narrative creation. I literally just did a presentation on this for an all-female fitness expo about how women identify themselves in sport, and looking at the fact that, we're so, especially as you're describing there, when we look at the general self-concept, we look at the way we value ourselves, where we put our values and our body image, or our physical ethics and our physical abilities. If we don't put that value in there ourselves, we don't put that there through, proving our competence or proving our ability to then remind ourselves that we are capable and competent to do it. The second that someone has an opinion and we haven't developed that identity or that narrative of ourselves yet, we take that on board, right? Like, you think back to early days, I know myself, like my father's my biggest critic, but I recognize it now as his sense of nurturing and growing me was that rather than blowing smoke up my ass because I scored a try, he was like, okay, you threw this shit pass, or you did a bad kick, or you missed this tackle. So where everyone else is saying, yeah, pat on the back, great job, I'm like, oh, fuck, dad's disappointed or let me down. That sort of ability then to recognize that I'm seeing that I'm competent at being good, but I'm also humble enough to like, I'm being grounded. I'm being like taught to look at the situation and fix what I sucked at. When we have these people, I guess, that come in with the, either not good enough self-concept or they're too full of themselves, either way, that narrative gets checked very quickly when they're put in those situations. It's like, there's no one here blowing smoke anymore, but also, you need to raise my standards. So if you're coming in without the right mental perspective, the right, I guess, identity, a story that you're telling, we need to shift that. We need you to walk out of here saying, I am capable to do this. I'm going to change what I need to change. I'm going to do this. I'm going to build this life. One of my most successful stories was having someone who came to me for a physique prep, walked away recognizing that his main goal was to join the Defense Force in the Air Fighter Pilot program. We shifted that entirely just by, I'm like, tell me your story. Tell me the story you want the world to understand. What is it that you're trying to take and say to people? Like, if you were to introduce yourself to a room, what is the story that you want to be said at that introduction? And it's not, I could tell that it wasn't physique preparation or bodybuilding. It was like, that'd be cool to do, but like at the crux of it, what is it that you want said? What do you want to say about yourself, or what do you want to build? And he's like, this, and this. And we literally just shifted his entire training from there, and life just skyrocketed. I was like, you're basing it based on the narrative or story that other people are telling for you, which was, bodybuilding, I've got to be shredded, I've got to do this. And I'm like, when we redirect that and ask what you wanted, it literally just took off. He's like, I want to give everything I can to doing this and excel. And I want to take flights around the world. I want to fly. I want to deploy. I'm like, okay, cool. That's your thing now. That's the story we're telling. And then life just took off once he identified it. That narrative, or that image you're talking about, it just created a whole different life for him on a different trajectory, because we actually got to the depth of, okay, you've told me you wanted to bodybuild, but what do you actually want? And we get to that bottom of it. We start telling now, like, it's almost like we give them permission as coaches to say, you're allowed to tell me what you want to do. You're allowed to say what you want in life, but then we're going to put a plan in place to execute it. I'm not working with people that just want to tell a story of, I want to do this one day. Like, you tell me you want to do it. You say that this is what you really want in life. We make a plan and execute. And it's like you're giving them that freedom.
Yeah, I do not do well with people that don't know what they want. So I would be a very bad exploratory coach, right?
Yeah.
So someone who's basically saying, let's go through this process and figure out what you want to become.
Yeah.
You're not going to like the experience, because for me, and I have plenty of people that are in my life like this, and it is very hard on me, because I know that I'm causing more problems and more harm than good, because I'm like, look, like, figure your shit out already. Like, what do you mean you need to take time? I'm like, the worst statement for me is like, I'm still working on it. What do you mean you're working on it? You're either doing it or you're not. And I'm just, it's very hard for me. Right. So like, I tell people, like, in this environment, it is the one place where you are going to be rewarded if you are selfish. Mm-hmm. The more selfish you are, the better you're going to be. Mm-hmm. Because this is the world where it is about you, and you get a complete, like, whatever you put into it, that will be the output. Your effort, your strategy, that work that's put in will be directly correlated to your output, right? Like, you can't cheat basically a bench. You can't cheat, the kitchen. You can't cheat those things. Now, genetically, you might have someone that could do a little bit faster, but when it comes down to being on the line, your confidence comes from knowing that I made sure every stone was left unturned in my preparation. And because I know that I basically put it all on the line and I did everything in my power, I have the then confidence, right?
Yes.
You don't have the confidence if you cheated reps, or you cut out on your conditioning,
100%.
or you did, you could have done something different. Like, you're always going to have a little insecurity, right? You talked about, like, image and difference between men and women. I'm going to give you a stereotype that's very unique and interesting from my perspective. So, out of all the women in the world, you ever wonder which ones are the most confident?
Go on.
In your experience, it's always the ones that are a little heavy. Fat women are way more confident than skinny women.
That is very fair.
And you know why? Because they have really good self-awareness. They know that they're a little heavy. And they figured out how to be okay with who they are.
Yeah.
But skinny women have always had people judge them based upon their bodies.
Yeah.
So they actually don't know if they gain weight or they lose weight. They have a strong disassociate with themselves. Yeah. Whereas women that are a little bit heavier tend to have way better self-awareness, which means better personality, more honest with you, more direct with you, better attitudes, right? Don't take shit from guys. And then all of a sudden you have a girl that's younger, and when she was, maybe when she was in an environment that didn't suit her, when whatever. And then when she gets older and starts taking care of herself, she's gorgeous. That doesn't mean she's not pretty. That doesn't mean she's not attractive. It just means she was a little heavier set in a different area of her life.
Mm-hmm.
Goodness gracious, I was much better looking when I was younger, right?
I was a lot smaller when I was younger.
Yeah, so it's like, like we judge people by these like small areas of where people are in their life, but it's just a fraction of actually their real journey. I still identify as a very strong, powerful, and explosive person. I'm not, because I'm very, very far removed from the athlete that was 235 pounds that could jump 39 inches and was super fast. I am very far removed from that athlete.
Yeah.
I was the athlete that coaches love to like beat in the dirt because I was not going to quit and I was in great shape. Now I have to like cheat my water break. Now I'm going to basically, how do we extend this round out a little bit this entire right?
Yeah.
So, you understand that, but I am in my head, I still think of myself that way. Right.
Yeah, for sure.
So I grew up in a football environment where most people, my clients, even, themselves I'll get a picture back where I happen to be with a number of my clients that I'm with or athletes that I'm around. And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even like, I'll even like not even recognize myself. I'm like, oh, that was me. Cause I'm like the little guy.
Yeah.
I'm tiny. Yeah. I'm 240 pounds right now, probably 250 to be honest with you, which is pretty bad. But I'm tiny compared to an offensive lineman that's 6'4", 330.
Yeah.
I have a tight end that I was working with, yesterday. He's 6'9". I look like a midget next to him.
That's a big deal. I mean?
But I don't ever feel like I'm small because I'm always in that environment, right?
Yeah.
So people that have very good awareness, they become comfortable in those environments. They become comfortable in their skin, and then they can start applying that in so many other areas of their life. And then as they mature, that's based upon those foundation, the foundation of emotion, right? So they then take a little bit more of a conscious effort to probably take care of their health. It's just what happens. So these are just little things that you pick up, and I don't know the study and I can't recite the book where it comes from, and I don't know the philosopher that created the concepts, but if you have life experiences, you're going to start to create pattern recognition to figure out kind of where you want to be. And for me, every time I start to see a pattern of what someone then does, I try to either protect myself from the next data point of the pattern, or I want to put myself into that data point of the pattern. That's it. And it's just depending on kind of where what you're trying to achieve.
It's funny you put it that way in regards to like, the studies and the data. I literally just put up a post not too long ago regarding kind of the way that the fitness industry or the coaching industry attacks like the elite end of the spectrum, right? Like, these guys we know that just absolutely abuse themselves, nothing but grunt, cuss, hard work ethic to get where they are. And it's like, that's not optimal way to do it. And so it's kind of like the community will just dismiss them. Like, there's nothing to teach us. They're idiots. Like they're just meatheads. It's like, hold the phone here. We've got, it's hard to get data. The absence of data doesn't present the absence of evidence. You've got people in the trenches doing this shit that we can pull back from and learn from. And it's one of the first pieces of blogs, articles that I wrote was how I like to look at the likes of, Jordan, Kobe, Tiger Woods, Musk, all these elite people. And it's like, we don't have to have the data on them. They didn't know the data concepts back then or the points or the topics to say, oh, this is the principle I'm applying. They just did certain things and it worked. How are we dismissing entire populations of elite success to say, oh, well, it's not in the book, so it doesn't count? Like, there is something to be said for anecdotal experience and application that they figured it out. There's something we don't know. They've got a skill set that we can learn from or implement in our life. It's like, how, instead of looking at these guys and saying, oh, they're too far out of the spectrum, like dismiss them, I'd rather look at it and say, how do I be more like them? What can I take from them to implement in my life to make it better? Whether I want to be an athlete or whether I want to be a CEO or a business owner, whether I want to be better at my studies, how do I be more like these guys to succeed, or at least plant the tools that I can succeed, right? Like, it's such a weird thing in fitness where we just look at a pro bodybuilder or a pro basketball or an NFL player and go, oh, that's an outlier. They don't represent the general population. No, you're right. They're the outliers. Let's see how they got there. They didn't have the data.
Don't you want to be an outlier?
Exactly, right? Like, why do you want to be the herd?
Like, yeah, I mean, isn't the reason why you are striving towards greatness is so that you could become great? Like, that, isn't that the point?
Yeah, right.
So, you bring up an interesting point, and one of them is that like everyone thinks that early specialization is the key. But if you look at like, I think it was Esteem's book on range, which was talking about basically athletes that did early specialization and had success, and then athletes that played a lot of sports then all had success. We could skew the data whichever way we want if we only look at the people at the top.
Yep.
But one of the things that they all have in common, right, is the attention to detail. Like no matter what, they have a high level of attention to detail. They have there's a strong competitive nature, right? And they have basically a willpower that's going to persevere past their obstacles. So whenever it gets hard, they go deeper.
Yep.
That's one of the unique skills of a high performers. Whenever it gets hard, they don't shy away. They go deeper into it.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of people, the minute it gets hard, they quit, or the closer they get to the top, they quit.
Yeah.
And they will start to self-sabotage. So it's how do you protect an athlete from that? What can you do in those environments? One of the things you talked about too is like bodybuilders and not being able to take things away from like, certain people that have, high, great genetics, which genetics play a huge role in sport. They play a huge role
100%.
in competition. They play a huge role in business.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like the person who's smarter, the person who's taller, the person who's, was born into a family that has connections that could introduce them to the right people. These are all factors. The world's not fair. Get over it.
Yep.
Right. But you're unique in the environment where there's something in your life that's unfair for you in a good way. And you better take advantage of it. And if you don't want to take advantage of it, then you're just going to cry and be victim. And you're going to be left with basically holding the bag of shit. That's your choice. Right. So what can we take away from the people that are successful? You look at certain sports, bodybuilding is the ultimate case study. There's two sports that I would say are the most disciplined athletes. Bodybuilders, which I'm not a bodybuilder, never been a bodybuilder, but I've seen it, and wrestlers, which I was a wrestler. And in our own ways, we are the most like disciplined people when we need to be. Yeah. When we are off, we are the most off.
Yep.
Right. So it's very, very interesting when you see those two different disciplines, right, of sport, completely opposite for each other. One's performance only. You don't care what you look like. Matter of fact, the wrestler doesn't look strong, doesn't look like he's in shape sometimes, right? But they're a dude. And then you have the guy who basically is all show, no go.
Yep.
But is that true? So here's an interesting thing. We say that, but is it true? And the reason why I say that is this. You're around bodybuilders. Are they not strong as shit?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Peak phase.
We're strong. You guys are strong as shit. Boys. But powerlifters don't think you guys are strong.
Yeah. Yeah.
I tell powerlifters all the time, you want to work on something in a completely unconventional way and get you significantly stronger than you've ever thought you'd been. Go work with a bodybuilder. Go work with a powerlifter. And there's some things that you could learn.
Yeah.
Because one of the benefits of bodybuilding is understanding, like, how do I hit things from a different angle to get development that is going to make me look a certain way. Yeah. Right. And you could start messing with people's, like, if they got a long torso, if they have, like, I have a naturally broad shoulders. I have a big back guy, right? I have a big neck guy. Like, if I'm going to naturally, because of the way my body shape, I'm going to naturally look like I have small biceps.
Yeah.
I have to like over index on my training on that so that I can kind of compensate in other areas.
Correct.
Right. But if you have someone that's got like shorter arms and they look like they're going to have big biceps, well, then maybe you got to like over exaggerate or over program in certain areas of your body to make sure you hit different angles to create a certain shape, or your poses have to be, differently at slightly different angles in order to kind of get the kind of look that you want. Right. But and powerlifters are all about move the bar A to B, move the bar A to B, right? Yeah. And it's like, well, hang on a second. You're staying in the single plane of motion all the time for so long. Have you ever thought about hitting it from different angles so that you can start adapting to the other things and then go back to that and see what happens? No, that shit don't work. Well, have you ever tried it? Oh no, those guys just look good. They're not that strong. Have you ever lifted with them?
Yeah.
So my brother, right? I give him a program one day, and he wanted to do like what I was doing with the NFL Combine guys. So it's a 225 rep test, right? So it's like, we realize that you cap out at a max rep test within a certain amount of seconds. It's not a certain amount of reps. So it's how fast can you rep that work in a certain amount of time? Because you have a muscular fatigue, even if it's under strength endurance. So there's a window of fatigue, and it's between that 30 to like 47 seconds window. That's about it, right? You maybe have that 10, 15 second kind of buffer, depending on the athlete. We know the higher your maximal strength is, the more likely that you are to rep that out, even if you don't do a lot of strength endurance work. We know that. But I give my brother this program. He's doing 225. My brother loved bodybuilding, so he was pretty strong. It's one of the reasons why I didn't get into bodybuilding, right? But he shows me a picture. He's like, "Oh, my chest is effed up. What happened?" Sends me a picture. He completely tore his pec. I mean, this thing was like over here. It is, his entire chest is purple and red. I'm like, "Oh, this is bad." I'm like, "What were you doing?" He's like, "Well, I did the 225 thing for a while, but then I got bored. That was just too easy. I got to so many numbers." I'm like, "So I started just doing like 315 for 20. I'm like, 315 for 20? Do you realize that you're just, he's like, "I'm just trying to get back into training." I'm like, "What are you doing? You realize how much strength, like how much load that is?" And he's just like, "Yeah, but like I could barely feel 225. I couldn't really feel my muscles at 225. I'm like, "Oh my God." But again, you give that to any sport athlete.
Yeah.
And that is a crazy amount of weight. So perspectives are completely different. And
100%.
most people are not willing to get out of their element to learn. And that's really where I've been able to accelerate a lot of my education, is just like get as uncomfortable as possible and then kind of go back to your environment.
Yeah.
Get as uncomfortable as possible and then go back to your environment.
I think it's important too to recognize in that you're finding uncomfortable environments, but you're also creating that environment, right? Like, you know, to loop right back to the start where we started talking about environments, you're creating environments where you can be uncomfortable, you're seeking it out, you're putting yourself in those environments in general, where so many people don't want to do that, whether it be because, you know, their diet, their appearance, they're scared of their ego being checked, they don't want to lose, they don't want to risk the chance of failing. And so they don't put themselves in these environments to grow, improve, get better, progress. And that's where I find, in not only the research, but just anecdotally in my clients and myself, most of the growth occurs when you're willing to put yourself in those environments that are challenging, that are developing, that force you to reflect, look inwards at yourself, look at who else you're surrounding yourself by. Like, it's so ironic how quickly we got to environment in the chat, because one of the first pieces of education I put out was our philosophy book on environmental psychology, and how, like, we call it optimizing your environment for success, because it was when I was looking at, even myself, I was a terrible student in high school. My main subjects were like histories, sports, and manual work. Everything else I just had no interest in. My English teacher basically said, "I'm going to fail you." And so I took that as like spite, and basically was like, "All right, screw you." When I got to uni, it wasn't so much that I was good at study. I also had to put myself in an environment that forced me to adapt and be better and find out where I sucked. So I had to look at ways that, okay, how do I study properly? How do I learn? How do I get better? Because at the moment I suck at studying. And that was no different to, like, stressing the muscles for bodybuilding. It was like, how do I put myself in that environment where I create stress that's going to force me to adapt and make me be better? And that was looking at the fact that I'm a very competitive person. I'm very driven and I'm very stubborn. Okay, so I need to pick out someone in the room that I'm going to be better at, that I can better than that study, or I can basically do the class better than they did. It makes no logical sense to the average person, but that's how I had to figure it out. But I wouldn't have known that if I didn't put myself in that environment, right? If I didn't seek that out and say, well, this is how I have to do it, or in order to grow in this environment, this is what I have to do. And it's so interesting to me how much just being put in an environment makes such a difference. I've said it for such a long time that, if you have big dreams and you surround yourself with short-minded people or small-minded people, you're basically, like we said at the start there, you basically have a glass ceiling of where your thoughts can go. You can't share massive dreams to small-minded people because they'll pull you back in. And so what that sort of like hot air balloon takeoff basically just gets flattened out and just popped. And it's like, all right, come back down to earth. Take that same concept and put it around other, CEOs, entrepreneurs, athletes. They'll just say, yeah, that's normal. Like, what's up with that? That's nothing. Like, go do it. What's stopping you? But if you're around those shitty, and I find it's probably, you'd probably say it's pretty prominent in American culture as well. Like the high school friends that just stay friends forever. They all go to the same parties and stuff, like kick on for however long. And there might be one or two in there, athletes you might have worked with, that they've got the dream to go pro, succeed, take on that next step. But the environment they're in is just so anchored in high school and drama and bullshit and parties and drinking. It's like, you're limiting or you're self-defeating just by simply being in such a poorly fostered environment. that you're basically anchoring yourself to where you are and not creating that chance to grow. Put yourself into that environment where growth is possible out of stress, out of development, out of pushing, and you will just, even if you don't win and you aren't the most successful, you will still be more successful than if you're in that environment that was just so limiting.
So if you take that and you look at where kids are nowadays, they're on Discord, they're on games, they're on Twitch, they're even off social media. They're on another platform that has a little different interconnected components, right? Mm-hmm. Do you know the largest chat communication app amongst kids in middle school and below is?
Wouldn't have an
idea. A Google Sheet or a Google Word document.
I've heard about this.
Yep. And all that, because number one, it's like they could do it in their school, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they can delete it and there's no paper trail.
Yep.
Right. And then they know who's talking and who's jumping into a chat, and there's multiple people that could be in there, and they don't get any notifications. They're just seeing it happen. Right?
Yeah.
So it's disconnected from the distraction. It's disconnected from the authority, and it's disconnected from the risk of anything coming down from where their environments are. Kind of crazy when you think about how smart younger kids are. We didn't figure that crap out.
100%.
Right? Now, you look at that and you go, okay, they're on these platforms. That's their social behavior. That's where they're engaging with people. That is their environment. Mm-hmm. So technically, it's actually here in this box. Mm-hmm. And when you're in this kind of vacuum, and then the only voices you hear are the handful of people that are always agreeing with you at that age group.
The echo chambers.
And then you go to high school, and then you go from there to college. And then what happens is you have a friend group. Let's just say it's 3 to 5 people, right? It rarely is more than that. Let's say it does get up to 8, but let's just say it's 3 to 5 people. Group of guys, whatever it may be. They're all hanging out. 3 or 4 of them, they're all basically, they don't have a job. They're in college. They're doing their thing. All 4 guys, all right, or 5 guys, 4 of them are in college. One decides, hey, he wants to go to trade school. So he bounces out of the group because he actually can't communicate now with them in that channel. Mm-hmm. One drops out of college, but he's still in that environment because he's not really working. He don't have a real full-time job. He's kind of bouncing in and out, doing these things. So then you have these other 3 that are in college, and then you have this one, right, that is still communicating with. So they're friends, and they're in that echo chamber for 3-4 years. Mm-hmm. What happens? Those 3 guys graduate. The 4th one that is in trade school, he's actually already in his job. He's in the union. He's doing something. And then that one that's just sitting there, he don't have any friends anymore, because guess what? Those other guys have a job, and he doesn't have a degree anymore. Mm-hmm. So if you're in that situation, you've created that environment. When you create a vacuum, right, you self-pollute it.
100%.
Literally the most important thing of when you being in a vacuum is, what are you outputting?
Yeah.
Because it's going to basically contaminate the environment. So one of the things that I do that is a great kind of teaching tool is I like to shoot. If you ever had a gun in your hand, I don't care how good you are at shooting. I don't care how often you've done it. You realize that this thing actually could do something. You're going to be a little nervous. I don't care how good you are at it. You're going to be a little nervous when it's in your hand. So I bring guys to the range. I bring my other coaches. We bring them to the range. We have a subject that we want to talk about. I'll bring a person in business that wants to do something with me, and we'll go to the range. So they have to go 20 minutes and go through a training course with the, with the range officer. And because I'm there, I can kind of, shoot the shit and relax and kind of get everything ready. And I bring them in and say, hey, this is what we're shooting today. This is what we're going through. I'm not doing lessons. I ain't teaching them. They all tell me that they're great shots, right? I don't really care. Here's the reason why I don't really care. You put the target up, there's a bullseye on there. It's really, really simple. How quickly do you get a realization if you're good at something or not when you're shooting? Instant.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you either hit it or you didn't, or you're off or you're not. It's not that hard, right? So, but mind you, you better stick to the rules. That gun stays downrange.
Yep.
Right? Know where your stance are. You're not turning around with it. You're not talking to me. While that's going on, you are in a completely different state. Mm-hmm. And if you're not, I'm going to put that down, or the range officer is going to go ahead and say, hey, we need to stop. So this is kind of what's taking place for about 30 to 40 minutes, right? If you think about it, high intense environment, high focused environment, no dicking around, right? Really quick self-awareness. I'm not as good as a shot that I thought I was. No matter how good of a shot I am, I'm not like that all the time, right? And then I'm going there to work on things sometimes. So, I'm actually still working through some stuff. When that session's over, I have a highly focused, very concentrated individual that said they wanted to do business with me, or said they wanted to discuss a topic with me, or wants to talk about training or talk about work. They've just been in a state of anxiety for basically an hour. I got 15 minutes. What did you want to talk about again? All that crap's gone.
Yeah.
Give me your 15 minutes of the best stuff, because I could go on forever, right? We could sit here, talk, we could shoot the shit, we could do that. But then what are we actually getting done? Right. So if you actually take your time and you spend an hour of talking, what are the actual points that we needed to kind of take away? So I figured, like, we're going to go do something that's going to put us in a better state for those 15 minutes. That is my version of the Abraham Lincoln story, that if I had 10 hours to chop a tree down, I'm going to spend 9 sharpening my axe, right? That's my version of that, because that's what I'm doing with the person to create a better state and a better environment for those discussions. Because no matter how good you are at shooting, no matter how often you've shot, no matter if you grew up with them, you still know. Matter of fact, the person that is the least anxious or the least understanding of what that gun could do is the one that actually has the least experience.
It's what should scare the most.
The most stressed out is the one that knows exactly what can happen. Right. So they're the one that's pretty much always on. So if you think about their state while that's going on, is they're in a hyper-focused state. They're not like, oh, whatever. Like, no, this is what happens.
Their environment's prime for conversation, to think and speak.
So I like to do that. It's a little kind of tool that I've used to put people in different environments, because it's immediately a reality check. It's a real good self-awareness environment. And it creates an attitude adjustment that puts somebody into a state so that we can focus on the time that we have.
I like that. That's good.